There's a tech tip that can save you $5 if you know about it before you take it to your dealer. So these 3 plugs we use for failure analysis and for core criteria. This is the plug that goes to your differential. This plug here goes into your brake area and your final drive. Okay, so for this example, let's just say that this is a left-hand side and that's the final drive that's failed. So here's what you do. If you're in a field, you need a good piece of wood. Get you a 2x6, 2x8, 2x12, something like that. Get you some white shop towels, brand new. Go to the hardware store and get them if you need to. Lay them on your towel, and put something on it so it doesn't blow off. The side that you suspect has failed, when you remove that plug, you take it and you lay it flat onto the surface of your wood, onto your white towel. You don't touch the top side of it, you just set it on the bottom and you just set it flat down. You go to your middle, you pull it, then you set it on your towel right next to it, so it's quote number 2. Then when you go to this one, you pull number 3 out and you do the same thing. So why do we suggest that? So again, we had a final drive failure on this side, so this plug is going to have a lot of junk on it. It's going to be nasty, it's going to have sharp metal flakes, and that's going to identify our failure. What we hope is that you don't have that same metal flakes here in your differential. If you do have sharp metal flakes in your differential, then you may have 2 problems. So we know we have a final drive problem, and we may have a differential problem, or ring and pinion, whatever. Going to our third, the same thing. We're actually doing an inspection without going into the axle. So what you would typically see with a failure is sharp metal on number 1 and just normal, or maybe some smaller flakes, not flakes, but let me try to explain this. So these are shards or metal filings, and then so you look through here and you see some smaller pieces. So when they talk about contamination, it's based on size of the material and then the volume of the material. So here, hopefully you don't see as much. And then hopefully here you see less. But if you had all 3 of those had the same amount of content on them, then you had a massive failure, and there's no reason for anybody to go into it except with the purpose of doing a repair. Here, it tells you that you've got a final drive you've got to replace, and you probably don't have to replace a differential or ring and pinion, but it's going to tell you there's metal in it, which is bearings and seals. Here, it's going to tell you the same thing, that you've got metal in it, and you're going to need bearings and seals. If you don't replace the bearings and seals in your differential or in your other final drive, then what will happen is, one, if they were the same age and your one final drive failed, this one is not far behind it. So when it fails, it's going to do the same thing to the one that you just fixed. So it doesn't mean that you have to buy a complete axle, but it does mean that if you're going to keep your tractor, the right thing to do is to go ahead and do bearings and seals all through the axle. As an example, single reduction axle, John Deere, if you have to buy a final drive all brand new, let's say it cracked your axle housing, you're looking at $25,000 for new parts, and you're going to spend another $12,500 in bearings and labor for the rest of the axle. A complete axle, new bearings and seals with no mechanical problems is $15,000. That's what we pay. And a final drive's $25,000 if you have to buy a new one. So because you bought a new one, you discount the bearings and that labor and call it $12,500, so you're at $37,500 for a axle repair because of one final drive failure. If your dealer goes into it and then tells you that you've got to do tells you what we already know, one, they've taken it all apart. If you buy an axle from Deere or from us or from most anyone, they're going to want it back together because ours comes on a stand. You can't send it back in pieces. So you got to spend the labor to put the damn thing back together. So that's the purpose of checking these plugs prior to letting anyone get, or really before it even comes off the tractor. Because then you already have a decision made. Or excuse me, it can help you make a decision. You can start getting an axle on its way, shop's getting it out. You know, from us, about any place is 2 days. If they can get it out, get the other one back in, you're back up and going pretty quick.